My name is Casey Cruz, and the title of my first case study is An Art Form and Pastime, Video Games and Today's Culture, featuring Hey Ash, What You Playin'? I have decided to present my case study as a video for a few reasons. First, I have been a vlogger on YouTube since April of this year, and I am somewhat familiar with the format. Secondly, the format of this case study, as it plays out in my head, wouldn't necessarily come off the way I would like it to if it was formatted as an academic paper. I'm thankful to my professor, Martin Danahay, for giving us a bit of freedom with this assignment and saying we could create a video if we chose to. I'm going to try to make sure this isn't too long or difficult to get through as a means of saying thanks. So one of the reasons that this case study is going to be formatted a little differently is that I would like to connect various points in my case study with using the video game web series Hey Ash, What You Playin'? Before I delve into my topic, I would like to show you a typical episode, explain a little bit about the series, and then tell you how I came across my topic using the series.
Have you played Puzzle Quest? It's really good.
No, I can't. I'm colorblind.
What?
Since birth, you didn't know that?
No? How did you survive for so long like a normal person?
What?
Did you use echolocation?
What are you-
Like a bat?
What? No, I'm not like a bat. I'm not blind.
You just said!
Color blind. I can't see certain colors, so in puzzle games they sort of mix together and I screw up.
Jesus. So is everything in like black and white for you?
No, that's really
Like
rare. I'm just
Casablanca?
red-green colorblind.
You can't see red or green?
It's not that I can't see them, it's that my eyes can't process certain shades of red or
You
green.
can see through things that are red or green.
No.
What if I painted that wall red? Would you be able to see through it?
No.
What if I wore a green sweater? Would I just be like a disembodied head just floating around?
Are you even listening to me?
What's Christmas like? Is the whole world invisible?
We're done talking.
Do you have a color-seeing eye dog that can tell you what color things are?
What?
Like to tell you when the light's green.
That wouldn't work. Dogs are colorblind too.
You're a dog?
I'm gonna fucking kill you! Ashley, I need my DS back. Where'd you put it? Ash, where are you?
I fucking knew it!
So that is an example of a typical episode. The series is made up of a series of skits, reviews, and occasional pieces of educated commentary, all based on video games. The creators are Anthony Burch, who works at Gearbox Software and was the head writer for the game Borderlands 2, and Ashley Burch, his sister, who typically represents the stereotypical obnoxious gamer. The series spans over 4 seasons, and a 5th season is currently in production. A lot of the episodes can be crude, but they're still humorous, and they're all tied into video games. A great thing about this series is you don't have to necessarily understand or have played the games they reference in order to enjoy the episodes.
Is a far more subtle thing to irritate Anthony Burch. It's delicate.
Hey Ash, what you-
Ow! I broke your stupid crap! Not even winded!
So there's a specific reason I have decided to use Hey Ash, What You Playin', or HOP for short, in my case study. That is because the variations of these episodes are what sparked my idea for this topic. So, in a lot of these episodes, Anthony, being the one that focuses on complexities of video games instead of looking at them for their mere entertainment value, usually has some interesting points regarding video games to bring up.
Don't make that noise like you're thinking stuff. You're just gonna go on a boring-ass monologue about games.
I'm playing the Game of Thrones game and it's making me think about
God, it's already started.
faithfulness to a franchise versus creating a quote-unquote fun gameplay experience.
Whereas Ash is displayed as someone who enjoys video games for more simplistic reasons.
This game is off the chizzo.
Oh, I'm glad you like it.
Changing dimensions is fun as fuck, and that's all there is to it.
Yeah, but come on, there's more to it than that. The mechanics are actually pretty deep. Like, the puzzles aren't designed for difficulty, they're designed for little aha moments that...
Not listening, heavy, fluffy, fluffy.
But in these episodes, both have conflicting perspectives that are able to coexist peacefully. To be more specific, while Anthony believes that games are more than a source of entertainment and have a lot of artistic value, that doesn't mean that he can't see past those details to realize that games are a great source of fun.
Don't let her shoot. Stop letting her shoot.
I'm trying!
There, steal it now. Press B, press B, 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 B.
I am! I'm pressing them!
And while Ash shuts out Anthony the majority of the time when he brings up these points, she still shows evidence of analyzing the greater details of what make up a video game.
You know what's scary about this game?
No, what?
Fucking nothing!
I agree.
It seems like the mechanics and the atmospheric goals are diametrically opposed.
What?
Everything's supposed to be terrifying, but the gameplay is about the same old sense of action hero empowerment. You can't be terrified when you're a fucking walking death machine.
It's actually a really good point, coming from you.
And that's where I came up with the idea for this case study. I want to focus on the idea that video games can be both a legitimate pastime as well as a type of art form. It doesn't have to be one or the other. These ideas can coexist simultaneously in the gaming industry. I'm going to be structuring this case study by first looking at games as a source of entertainment and as a legitimate pastime, even though they're not always taken seriously in that respect. Next, I'm going to focus on how video games are a type of art form much like literature and music, which are built on several complex ideas and theories. Lastly, I'm going to tie all of this information together and explain how these two separate ideas can both apply to video games as a source of media, and that there's no pressing need to have them exist on only one end of the spectrum. So let's first look at games as a source of entertainment. For years, there have been articles and news segments that focus on the idea of violence in video games, along with suggestions that violent video games are warping the minds of children and desensitizing them to violence. While it might seem that the idea has died out as the video game industry continues to grow, there are still articles spreading out that discuss this issue, such as an article published in June 2013 by Adrienne, Holz, Ivory, and Christine E. Kaestle. This article focuses not only on the ideas of violence in video games, but states clearly that, quote, although much research has examined the effects of violence in video games, the effects of profanity also merit attention, unquote. The authors clearly reference the Grand Theft Auto game series by Rockstar Games. Grand Theft Auto 5 was recently released, and it carries on the same traditions of aggression and violence, as well as a heavy use of profanity.
Your face, man! Don't let me down!
I will fucking destroy you! And everyone who knows you!
I don't know.
Oh, you know what? Just keep him away from me and the children, you low-life, whoremongering asswipe!
Did someone say yoga?
No, I think she said whoremongering asswipe.
It's because of articles like this and the exposure they get that provides one of the reasons that games are sometimes not taken seriously as a pastime in the same way movies are, even though movies show the same examples of violence and profanity. It's with that added element of interaction that video games have, that added level of immersion where video games get a bad representation in this sense. Not to mention there are a lot of examples in today's media how playing video games is an activity taken on by people defined by society as geeks or nerds. One example of a TV show that does this is The Big Bang Theory.
Hey guys, my friends and I got tired of dancing, so we came over to have sex with you.
Outrun the rush, jump in the tank! We said no tanks! There are no rules in hell! Son of a big med pack! I need a med pack!
Told ya.
However, in spite of all these negative attributes hurled towards video games and the video game industry in general, the sales for games are still huge, and there's a large and dedicated fan base connected to a multitude of different games, both individual games and game franchises. People connect online either through their computers or through their gaming consoles while playing games. There are conventions all over the world dedicated to video games, such as Gamescom, which took place this year in Germany. There are online forums and playthroughs and reviews on YouTube, as well as all over the internet. And even for people who aren't dedicated to the point where they're making game walkthroughs or going to conventions, there are games, such as a lot of sports-centric games, that are dedicated to more casual players. Ashley Burch also created a blog called How Games Saved My Life, and it's filled with testimonials from gamers all over the world, with posts titled How Robotech Battlecry Helped Better My Relationship with My Sister, and XBL Gave Me the Friend of a Lifetime, and How Halo Helped Me Through Chemotherapy. There are real people that have been affected in some way, shape, or form by video games, and like any other players that haven't posted on this blog, games are a means of having fun and connecting with other people. Now let's delve into the other end of the spectrum, because it's a lot more in-depth. This game was a shock to me, but it was probably the Hop web series to introduce me to the idea that there is more to game than just entertainment value. To start off with something simple, I want to show you an idea that Anthony brings up about video games being typically taken at face value, and that has to do with the vocabulary surrounding video games and the lack thereof. Examples they provide might not be ideal, but the point that Anthony brings up is still valid.
Nearly every existing art form has its own set of vocabulary that you can use to describe its techniques or ideas that are specific to that medium and that medium alone. Crescendos, deep focus, synecdoche. Any medium like music or movies or painting have their own vocabulary like that, but games don't, and maybe that might be one of the reasons that games are really hard to take seriously. So with that in mind, Ash and myself came up with the New Gamer Dictionary, which is a sort of way of trying to create this vocabulary from the ground up. For example, have you ever wondered what to call a situation in a game where you're given a bunch of ammo and health, only to immediately realize that they only gave those to you so you could fight off one huge-ass boss? You call that gore shadowing.
And what do you call when you're playing a game where the devs clearly didn't have enough time to finish the story like they wanted to?
Yay, this is so much fun. What? Fabulous.
Not bad.
Fuck you.
And what do you call the only person on a team in a co-op game who doesn't have a microphone?
Helen Keller.
It's got to at least sound game related.
Helen Keller 64.
What?
Helen Keller 64.
Perhaps if there is some educated vocabulary surrounding games, like the literary guides that I as an English student carry around on a typical basis, maybe games could be taken more seriously. Now to look at some more detailed examples. This episode from the 3rd season, centering around the game Fallout New Vegas, shows just a small fraction of Anthony's knowledge about games and ways in which they can be so much more than what they appear. And of course, for Ash, all this information goes in one ear and out the other, and so we don't get to hear everything of what Anthony intended to say.
Kill a hooker.
Sure, I'll do that.
Are you lying?
Yes.
What you do?
I am doing a playthrough of the game without killing a single person.
So you're making the game boring?
No, I'm changing the way it plays. It used to be a game about shooting people, and now it's a game about
Being a pussy? Big
thinking
old pussy?
and about talking my way through problems.
Size of a house?
Actually, by doing this, I'm treating the game less as a piece of consumable media and more like a series of systems and an experimental thing, which is arguably more what games are supposed to be in a large sort of just the way that the games work. Like how Ben Abraham used to do permanent death runs in Far Cry 2.
What?
Permadeath, playing a game where when you die, you delete your save game and just stop playing for good. Like, Ben Abraham did it with Far Cry 2, which lays this whole other metagame of, like, complex morality and stuff on top of it. Makes it way more interesting.
Nevertheless, this is an example of how games can be a lot more than what somebody does on a Friday night because all of their friends are busy. Another example is on the official Hey Ash What You Playin' website, where Anthony writes the occasional blog post related to video games. While playing the game Bioshock, his goal was to play a no direct damage run. What he summarizes this as is that he would not allow himself to harm enemies in the game by shooting them, hitting them with a wrench, hitting their body with any damage-dealing plasmid, which is a type of superpower you can control in the game, these plasmids being Incinerate, Electrobolt, or Bee-Swarm. He also did not allow himself to toss objects into enemies using telekinesis, as this toss would deal direct damage. He filmed his no direct damage playthrough of Bioshock, and using these rules, he was able to complete the entire game. At the end of his blog post detailing the results of his playthrough, he says, "Ultimately, the no direct damage run reminded me of why I love immersive sims so goddamn much. I tried to play the game in a really weird way, and the game let me. It was my decision to play Bioshock like a dork, and the game system allowed me to do so." There are many more examples than just what Anthony Burch has showed us about people playing games in ways different than what the creators had originally intended, and the games having been created with enough freedom in mind that they were allowed to do so. With Anthony playing Fallout New Vegas without killing anybody, this is a completely viable option in the game, whereas you might not be able to pull off the same objective in a lot of other video games. Anthony's comment on making the game, quote, less a piece of consumable media, unquote, is a way of showing that there are more to games than their entertainment value alone. There are also a large number of people in the industry who argue that games should be considered as a unique type of art form. When I say art, I'm not referring to the graphics or the artwork in a game. Having the game be pretty has nothing to do with it. But there are games and game creators out there that are making games that differ more and more greatly from the typical first-person shooter platform that is so dominant in mainstream gaming culture right now. A few examples of this would be the indie game Fez, made somewhat famous for its appearance in the 2011 documentary Indie Game the Movie. The game was released in May of 2013. This game is more so about exploring a world which the main character originally perceives as two-dimensional, but later finds out that there are a lot more dimensions of this world waiting to be discovered. Another 2013 release that plays with the image of the typical game is Gone Home, made by the creators of Bioshock, where there are no weapons and the game is purely about exploration. In another blog post dedicated to Gone Home, Anthony Burch refers to it as, quote, one of the most important video games of the last few years, unquote. He goes on to say, quote, Gone Home is basically an entire game based around subtle cerebral detective work of paying attention to your surroundings and drawing conclusions about what must have happened before you arrived and what sort of people might have lived there, unquote. In spite of the game being set in a dark house, this is not a horror game. Nothing will ever jump out and scare the player. You move through your house after having been traveling abroad for a year to find your parents and sister absent, and it's only through finding clues around the house that you're able to mentally put the pieces together and find out about exactly what happened while you were away. It's through not only games that challenge the preconstructed idea of what games are capable of being, but also through already established games being played in new and interesting ways, and the theories and ideas being constructed from there, that we can begin to perceive the idea that games have the capacity to exist as far more than a pastime. And finally, we look at both of these perspectives. The ideas that I presented you with so far are very conflicting ideas, both about what games are in the present and what games should go on to be in the future. Such conflicting ideas, it might be hard to see ways in which games can be viewed as both an entertainment source and as more than a piece of consumable media, but I would like to argue that it is possible for these ideas to coexist in a multitude of forums. First, in the book Understanding Video Games, The Essential Introduction, Simon Egenfeldt-Nielsen et al. Brings up the term coined by the founder of Electronic Arts Trip Hawkins in 1984, that term being edutainment. At its core, the term is a combination of education and entertainment. And this chapter of the textbook goes on to say that, quote, serious games have played a large role in this transition and will probably go on to have a still larger impact on the game market, especially since the barriers for larger penetrations in schools, such as limited hardware, are slowly evaporating. As these barriers disappear, the market may grow even more rapidly, unquote. The idea of edutainment is very much an attempt to compress the ideas of entertainment with video games and taking them as more than that, in this case, an educational platform. and to put them together to have games be a tool used more frequently in schools, and more effectively as well. This chapter goes on to detail several reasons in which games created solely for educational purposes have not proven to be most effective in the past. Quote, the attitude among educators, researchers, and game developers towards edutainment titles is often one of deep skepticism. The game design, the learning principles, and the graphics are all criticized heavily by both children and parents. An understanding is emerging among developers, educators, and research that to make successful edutainment games, one may have to be inspired more directly by the commercial game industry. The minimal success of edutainment titles over the last 10 years implies that children are unlikely to be attracted to discount games, unquote. I personally have played some of these educational games, and I can say it was very difficult to really get anything from them, especially when I would rather be playing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the NES with my brother. So if there are truly games that will be created for educational purposes that take inspiration from more mainstream games, I'm sure the success rate of these games would be a lot higher. There are actually examples of mainstream games already being used for educational purposes. One of them being a class in 2006 where a small group of students used the game The Sims 2 to learn how to speak French. The game was set up to be played in French, and because the activities the students were being asked to complete were in a simulation video game, quote, there was no student resentment to using the language to play the game. Quite the contrary to conventional homework which can be viewed as a chore, unquote. There's also an article that discusses the idea of video games as technical communication ecology by Julia Mason. She writes, quote, according to research in fields such as psychology, communication, education, and cultural studies, it is increasingly clear that massively multiplayer online role-playing games, MMORPGs, are actively characterized by socially and materially distributed cognition, complex problem solving, identity work, individual and collaborative learning, and rich meaning making. So video games are a way that can actually teach gamers to communicate and even problem solve. And there are also various games like Minecraft that promote creativity at such a high level, plus it is situated in such an open world that the game allows players the freedom to make the game into anything they want, whether it's just a blank canvas or to turn it into an entirely different kind of gameplay that the original creators could never imagine. It's ways like these in which video games can be a form of self-expression in the same way that music or painting can be a form of self-expression. Another example of this is where you have mainstream games where people who know how to play around with the game's code are able to create mods, modifications for the game. They create things that are both an act of self-expression and an attempt to make the game even more entertaining for themselves. So, for my conclusion, there is no need to situate games into only a few select categories. With the freedom allowed to people that have the knowledge to create these games, there is no reason why a game should only be made to have fun with, or should only be made as a source of commentary or as a medium of art. Both of these ideas centered around video games can coexist in a multitude of ways, and it isn't really necessary to value one idea over the other, because both ends of the spectrum are bettered by the existence and relevance of the opposite end. And I think that about wraps this up. Again, my name is Casey Cruz, and thank you for watching.
We need some driving music.
As long as it's good.
My jam. Yeah. You remember this? Come on.
Nice.
Early in the morning, rising to the street. Light me up that cigarette and I'll strap shoes on my feet. Got to find a reason things went wrong. Got to find a reason why my money's all gone.
Ooh.
I got a dimension and I can still get high.
You know it.
I can play the guitar like a motherfucking riot.